Okay, our first question will be coming from Chelsea Schwartz.
I'd actually love for somebody else to start. Thank you, though.
No problem, no problem. Our first question will come from Abe Freitanzer.
Hi there, how's everyone doing today?
Good.
Very good.
Great. I wanted to ask Shelley, this film is very claustrophobic in one way with the ship, and then also very vast with the ocean. What sort of informed you as far as the perspective was concerned for where you wanted this story to come from visually?
Well, of course, the goal was to put the audience right on deck next to the captain. And in doing that, when we saw the actual destroyer, which was the USS Kidd, moored in the Mississippi River in Baton Rouge, it was very tight. The interiors were even a little tighter than what we built. David actually made them a smidge bigger so that Tom could walk around in front of the portals and whatnot, which on the real destroyer he could not do. And what struck me about being on that ship was the diversity between small and large, interior, exterior. There were kind of these extremes that existed. And that, I tried to carry in through everything, into the lighting, into the camera performance. It informed me quite a bit just because of the extremes that they were working under, and having that ship there to look at and experience and see how it changed as the day progressed. It gave me a feel for what the voyage would be like.
Thank you.
All right, our next question is going to come from Boris Collector.
I think you have to turn your audio on, Boris.
Sorry. Hello, Shelley. Which scene of this movie was the most difficult to work on?
Oh, ask me that one more time, Boris.
Sorry. Which scene on this movie was the most difficult to work for you?
They were, to me, they all sort of had their moments. And this was a type of movie where just where you got to the end of one difficult sequence, there began another that was even more difficult, which was pretty funny. One thing that helped us a great deal, since a lot of the movie was shot on stage, was we shot much of it in script order. So that helped give us, kind of a running idea of where we were in terms of pacing, where we were in terms of developing the intensity that needed to be developed. And also kind of where we were in terms of informing the audience and bringing the audience on deck. It was required that they somewhat absorb what it was like to be on a destroyer, so that they learned that when the sonar pings are coming at a faster cadence, the target is getting closer, and when there's an interruption in the chain of communication, that actually disrupts their method of attack. So, David built us an amazing set on a motion base that we had on stage, and the motion base itself was somewhat diabolical, and just to be on it and to have our handheld cameras on it, it was wet and slippery, and as a ship would be. The only difference was we weren't on the open sea, and so I would say that working in the sequences on the motion base certainly were difficult for the camera operators, and to get our kind of natural light in there. And the night sequences in particular were delicate, since that required a certain type of a lighting concept where you could see into the ocean in what is ostensibly a lightless type of environment. So those were the real challenges.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Boris.
Our next question is from Tony Telato.
Yes, I have a question for Julie. Julie, obviously there's a lot of uniforms to design in something like this, but my wife and I got a kick out of the women's clothes and the 40s, in particular for Elizabeth Shue with her clothes and her hat. Talk about designing those clothes for especially for the scene between Tom and Elizabeth.
Absolutely, I will. But I must say, before we get into that, because Tom Kraus was in a uniform there. And when one is called to do a film like this from Aaron, and you look at this and you go, this is a Navy, a great script by with Tom Hanks, and you work with someone who writes this script, but a military movie does not diminish the individual. And you have a military advisor, you have someone there, but it must never diminish the individual. And I said that twice. And the reason that, yes, there is this extraordinary scene in a hotel. And as a designer, you cherish that because you have these clothes. This is what you love. Of course you love Elizabeth Shue. You love this chance to show color and Christmas. It's Christmas. And you have this 40s suit that she wears, and she wears it with pride, and it's the blue, it's the color of a sky and you have these this atmosphere, these people that you can dress in these extraordinary upscale San Francisco hotel. Yes, absolutely. Each one of these atmosphere where you're driving the AD crazy because you want a little more time to add a brooch that you'll never be seen, but just in case it's the person is standing next to them. But Tom Hanks's uniform, his uniform, the last one before he goes on board where he will be wearing a jacket, a great coat that with a group of these men that will be more than dots. They are more than dots. And Aaron Snyder understood that when he called me. And the reason that I'm so glad, I'm so happy you asked me about this hotel, because the colors there, the joy of Christmas, of being able to have Elizabeth Shue in that hat, where Tom Hanks and Elizabeth, where you had Krause and Evelyn sitting in that makeup trailer. And he didn't really love that hat. And we had another one. I like that hat. I love that first choice. But when he said, let's put this other one, let's try this. And that's when they became a couple. And those are the moments for a costume designer. That's gold. But the other moments are the blue there and the gray sky on the ship, where those sailors, those men become more than dots. They are individuals. Yes, they're individuals in uniforms, but they die as people on the Atlantic. And that is something that all of us, that Shelley allowed. You'll see the close-ups below deck where it's hot, above deck where Krause's fingers without gloves are stuck to that boat. And then you see, though, the warmth you see in the hotel. You could see the people, you could see the flesh, the warmth. So it's the opposites. It is the fashion, the walk, the looseness of the femininity, the last time. So you see the memories. That hotel scene had to be in the memories of what they're going to return to after the war. So that color and those clothes on the women and the men, but the women, the heart, I better stop. I think I better stop, because I could keep going on with the swatching and the suit and the shoes and the heels and the walk. But I'm so glad you asked. All right, I'll stop. But it was a company. We all did work together. And that's really what I enjoyed, all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Our next question is from Casey Mendoza.
Hi, I had a question for both Shelley and David about the battle scenes. Because so much of the action and the danger it took place so far away on other ships or even under the sea, can you tell us what it was about, what it was like crafting how to show all of those moving parts and all of that intensity, even though it was happening so far away?
David,
I'll
do
let
you want to start?
No, I'll let Shelley speak on that one.
What's that? You went,
I said, I'll let you speak on that one.
okay.
Well, I mean, a lot. It was interesting because it wasn't there; it was all out. But I mean, Aaron had really kind of very specifically figured out beforehand the entire voyage of where all the boats were at every moment, so that because there's a lot of information of how the ships travel that's really not explained in the film because it's not that necessary. But everybody needed to understand where things were and what their relationship was to them and where they were supposed to be looking, because they were looking out of windows at a big white screen. So a lot of that kind of information, I think, helped when you all got ready to do the actual filming. Does that make sense, Shelley?
Absolutely. You know, there's one regarding the night sequences. You know, it's, you know, film being a two-dimensional medium, you know, we cheat angles and we cheat distances a lot to kind of make things work in that on the two-dimensional screen. And so, you know, at one point during prep, Aaron came to me and said, you know, if we're, you know, going to be, you know, if the Despotico or whatever it was, the tanker is blowing up and it's 2 miles away, how do we make that explosion look like an event when we're not going to cheat it closer? I won't let you do that. I want the relationship. I want to know, because we're teaching the audience the difference between what a ship looks like 2 miles away versus 1 mile away versus half a mile or whatever it is. So he said, how can we make that look like more than just a little blip on the horizon? How can we give it drama? And you know, one of the things that we talked about visually was, well, at night they could be sailing through, you know, a lot of spray maybe and some thick ocean air, so that when the explosion occurred, it was also lighting the atmosphere and kind of creating this whole glow on the horizon and making it a much more dramatic event and things like that. And then those elements started to slowly come in, more of this atmosphere and more of the thick air and spray and things. And it's a unique, it was a unique problem those nights. You know, one that I liked how Aaron was pushing for dramatic solutions to get there, you know, for the audience. Yeah.
I also think probably, I mean, and I think y'all did this very well, is every event that happens, there's a difference to it. It's not just the same event happening over and over and over again, which is probably what it half is like when you're there. But I mean, every event had to mean something to push the story forward. So I think they thought that all out very carefully beforehand.
Great, thank you. Our next question comes from Michael Bergeron.
Thank you. This is for all three of you. Watching this film, I was so impressed by how nonstop action it was. I could not stop viewing. And I'm wondering, are there any moments in the film that you feel were cheated by it not having a big screen release?
Well, I can say this. I don't think any part of the film were cheated. However, seeing that film on a big screen is a very different experience. And I've thought to myself, because the sale to Apple didn't occur until we were halfway through the digital intermediate. I mean, it was very much the end of the process when that happened, because we were lined up for whatever it was, a June 12th release. And then things quickly switched over. And I asked myself, gee, if I knew this was happening ahead of time, would I have done anything different, you know, at least from a photographic standpoint? And I don't think I would have. I think I would have shot it as though it were for the big screen. But I will say this, you know, seeing it on the big screen, you see so many more details when it comes to Julie's costumes and David's work, and, you know, just the patina on that ship. And I think a lot of nuance and performance. I mean, that the film becomes a lot more faceted on the big screen.
I have something to say on this also. You do see, of course, you see from a costume designer, you see so much more, especially in the hotel. You see the details of the costumes of the 40s, of the fashion, we would see the expanse of the hotel, of the, yes, of course, of the women's designs and how they were shot. You miss that as a costume designer. But this is what my heart and brain missed. When you were on the USS Kidd, and when I got caught, when I felt something was wrong with a costume, and I climbed up to the top, and then I couldn't get back down, but I looked and I saw the Atlantic, and I saw the expanse of the ship, and I realized how close what the design of the set was, but I saw the expanse of the ocean, and I knew for a minute what it would have been like on a big screen. I miss that. Oh, and that's what I missed. Okay, I'm done.
Okay, great. David, did you want to answer the question as well?
Well, I haven't seen it on a big screen, so but I'm sure what they said. And I think also one thing you miss from big screen is it's usually in a theater, and I think seeing it with a lot of other people.
Yes.
Different experience than watching it by yourself on a computer screen, which is what I had to do. So, because it's built to be suspenseful, and that always helps with a lot of people around you.
Yes, that's a terrific answer. That yes, when everyone goes, oh, and then you feel, and then not just the person next to you, and now with what's going on with COVID, you can't even have a group of people who you know, or someone who you invite for other reasons that they don't even know why you're asking them. Get it? Okay, done.
Great. Our next question comes from Marvin Nolasco.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm from London. Good morning to all of you from the United States. In the United States, Greyhound is one of the most immersive war films I've seen in years. It's as if I was part of the crew of men aboard that ship. How are you able to achieve that?
Is this question for all of us?
Yes, madam.
Thank you. I'll answer quickly on this. I believe that it for a costume designer, certainly, it's in the script. You read the script and you know that those characters, that Krauss, that Cole, that the scenes that you have, that between those two, that the dynamics, that who Krauss left behind, that the fact that his belief that it's his first kill, that those dynamics that he's going to have with his crew, his forgiveness, his achievement, his desire to be part of, all of those things have to do with a quest of humanity, but also his spiritual, and they're never lost, no matter how many men there are. His relationship with Cleveland, that burial scene when he pushes back Cleveland's body. Those are moments that even as a costume designer, you want them to be dressed correctly. Of course you do. That is why you're hired as a designer, to make sure that even though they're in uniform, that there are variances, that at that time, and I'll make this quickly, that those uniforms, that they were individuals, that Levi's were that company were making some of them, that Tom Hanks's brown jacket with the fur, that was something that he was able to have of his own design himself. But the point that you're making is that there was great humanity in this. And that is why we were drawn, certainly I was drawn to this script. As a designer, to be part of these words and to see how they would come to the screen with someone like Aaron and Tom. But Tom wrote these for a reason. And hopefully we all achieve this as a company.
Yeah, I would say, you know, what's interesting about this script, I mean, is that the script is very procedural. So in terms of getting authenticity there, so much of the scenes had to be interpreted because until you really saw the actors perform them and you saw the faces of the crew, so much of the scene was occurring between the lines. There aren't a lot of personal scenes in this film. You sort of, you see the faces of the crew and you get to know them a little bit as they're performing their duties. And Tom wrote the script with this structure of this progression of watches that come in and out of the pilot house. And so you get this kind of rotation of faces as they move through and he stays consistently there. To me, it's that relationship and how they carry their performances somewhat silently. It's not really there in the dialogue. It's there in how they work as a group and how they communicate, and which was really the goal. And I think in terms of an immersion and getting an authentic type of feel, it was keeping with that kind of procedure. I know that was Tom's goal. He really wanted this to be a different kind of World War II film than he had ever seen before.
I think too, just the physical setup of that ship, when you go on it the first time, it looks small. But when you put the people in, you start working, and the number of people they have it, there's no way that you couldn't be immersed in it. And it became even more kind of amazing that anyone got anything done, and that it was as kind of clean and orderly as it was, because it was packed. It was, you know, it's like a can of sardines up in there. But I think and they shot it in a way that really, I think, just keeps reinforcing how tight they were on top of each other. And they are this little tiny thing out in the middle of the ocean, you know, with vast nothingness around them. But, you know, that really does just, it's a pressure pot of everybody in there, I think, so.
One last thing, for a costume designer, what was so clear and what we have in production design and cinematography, for a costume design to be on that set, the privilege, to be included every day. When you see Tom Hanks as Krause, you see big and little. We were cramped also. So we felt big and little, which affected our work on a daily basis. So we were able to see and feel that. And I do think that pervade into every day. And you saw that on the screen with the actors. Those sets were small. And in the studio, they were small. But on the kid on deck, it was big, but not as big as I thought it would be. So there was reality and tight. So.
Thank you. Our next question is going to be from Ricardo Gallegos.
Hello, this is a question for Mr. David Crank. This film has its fair share of visual effects. How did you approach the development of the visual style for the film, and what kind of relationship did you have with the VFX team? Did you have any conversations with them?
Yeah, but I think I wisely let them deal with that because it was, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it really was a work in progress as we did it, and ideas changed of how we were going to do it day to day. And what the first set that we built on stage, it kind of got bigger and bigger as we would be on the real one, because we went back and forth. And I think you kind of kept learning what you had to do in order to get something across. So, whatever ideas we had at the beginning were probably completely wrong by the end. So there were a lot of conversations, and a lot of that I think really got kind of figured out afterwards. We knew what we needed to have for them to be able to do their work, but how that was going to come across, I think really kind of it was a little different every day. It was like, oh, we're doing this now, okay. So you add another 5 feet to the back of the deck of the set overnight and keep on going. But I mean, I felt like, yeah, it was kind of a learning process when we were on there, because it wasn't like a regular set that you would have normally worked on.
Thank
Your
you.
next question comes from Chelsea Schwartz.
All right, let's see if my internet holds for this one. Julie, I had a question for you. Costume designing, especially in a military setting, can be such an interesting thing to do. So many people that look nearly identical, but not quite. Especially with a period piece, what I always get curious about is how much is vintage versus how much is created. Like, not even just in the uniforms, but in that gorgeous Christmas scene, which elated me to no extreme when I watched it. How much of that was inspired by pieces you found or actual things, or and what did you actually just say, I can't find what I'm looking for and I'm going to create this myself? Like, I'm just always curious by that.
I could talk about this forever. So I think that I will count by tapping my feet. All right. So here we go. I'm jumping off the bridge. All right. So the holiday scene. Firstly, when you are doing a period piece like a Christmas scene, the clothes come from everywhere, from everywhere. Of course, if I could draw and design things, I have sketches. You try and do a sketch. I have one here. I lifted it. I show it, not to show the sketch, but to show the process. You would draw everything. If you had time, you would make everything, but it doesn't stop you from setting a goal. Regardless of any budget, you draw, you create as if you had everything in the world, and then you go toward that. And you can find things. The clothes come from everywhere. They come, I have, unfortunately, 5 storage units. I'm so sorry I have them, but you'll find that the date doesn't matter. You'll find that people wear clothes, if you go on the street, that are much older and are contemporary. They come from everywhere. Therefore, the date, the majority of the date is of the presence, but you'll find an older gentleman in his favorite older suit. You'll find a woman wearing a fur coat from a different place. So some of the rentals, some are made, some are from my things, some you borrow, some you beg. And at least I don't look at the obituaries anymore. But all right. Now, as far as the sailors, oh, well, look what I almost said. As far as the sailors go, as far as Tom Hanks, of course, we made his uniforms. He stood with such grace, this was who he has been. This was the commission he has been waiting for. So his uniforms were made. And the coat, the leather coat, we went through many variations of it. And because, and his officer, he could make that one coat. They could design at that position, they could design a coat. So that leather coat he wore with the fur, he might have had that for a while. There were, in this particular time period, early in the war, there were not enough uniforms. Some of the uniforms were left over from World War I. There were men who drew on the back of their jackets. As I mentioned before, the Levi's company began to make the trousers and some of the jackets. Women's skirts became shorter to save fabric. So it isn't just a question of do you tuck or untuck. You have an advisor. You listen to the advisor. For us, Dale Dodd, he knew how to wear the uniforms. When it was a time for a burial, those uniforms were on that mark. But when you were working on that, when it was general quarters, which meant that you could die, that you were shooting, you didn't tuck, you were trying to preserve life, and you were looking toward that enemy, that was a cause greater. Those were things that were beyond the costume. And below deck, you had those working in the kitchen. They were minorities. They were, you had those people of color, that you had Cleveland, a black man, Cleveland, who was below deck, but when it came time to die, he was good enough to go up and wear a life jacket, and he was killed. So he could shoot and be killed with everyone else, but he was below deck. Those are the great lessons, and they showed up in costume. Did that answer your question a little?
Yes, absolutely. It was wonderful. Thank you.
And I could keep going. I'll give you my phone number.
Our
Thank you.
next question comes from Rook Elias.
Yeah, hi. This question's for Shelley. And first of all, even if I didn't know who you were, I would know you were a cinematographer because your Zoom image is absolutely perfect. It's yeah. One of the things I liked about the movie was that it had a very, for lack of a better description, vintage look to it. That it sort of looked as if you'd taken the cameras back in time and shot at that moment. Was there a particular technology that you use, or cameras, or lenses to make that happen?
Well, I think technically there are a couple of things that we did. For one thing, we did use very old lenses. They weren't lenses from the 40s; they're lenses from the 60s, but they were old and had a lot of character to them. It was interesting. Lenses we used were the Sphero 65 lenses that Panavision made. And what's interesting, when you put those lenses on a modern camera, the modern cameras have this way of electronically almost separating colors in a very, rather antiseptic sort of way. And then this older glass has a way of remelding those colors together in this quite wonderful way. And it was, I think, that combination of this initial separation of color, remelding of colors, is a lot of what created, I think, at least the movie's visual persona. On the other half of that would be the naturalistic lighting. Aaron, the director, who was formerly a cinematographer and quite a good one, talked to me a lot about natural lighting. And whenever you're in this visual effects environment, there's always that kind of idea that the lights may have kind of this Hollywood edge. The lighting setups may almost have this, be too perfect. And he was really urging me to dirty it up and to bring in light sources from very natural angles, let things fall off into shadow, do the opposite of what you typically would do on stage. Don't overlight it, don't overdo it. Which I was happy to be, somewhat given the okay to do that. On a visual effects film, what you want to do is build in those flaws that you would see in real life. And thankfully we had the ship there to see and to experience at different times a day. And the set that David created was absolutely amazing. You really felt the years of patina. You really felt the idea that so many men had fought and died on this ship, and the actual ship itself had a real soul to it. And David's set was so faithful to, the finishes and the surfaces and just the feeling that it imbued was remarkable. And Of course, Julie's costumes. She had little details. Like I remember asking her about one of the messengers, who was probably one of the younger cast members. His helmet was always kind of crooked. I asked her, I love the crooked helmet, and she said, "Oh, I just gave him a helmet that was one size too large." That's how she did it, to have that little character moment. Those little nuances are kind of what bring that authenticity there to it. And because we were on such a small set and working in such close confines, it was easy. You're kind of living with all of these little details and really had a chance to appreciate them.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Bernard Ozowski. Apologies if I said your name wrong. Bernard, we can't hear you. No, sorry.
Better now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to speak with us today. My question is for David. David, there's an immense amount of specificity in the designs of the set here. And I'm curious to hear about your research process. What sort of work went into coming up with the designs here? What sort of historical records and materials you found yourself relying on when coming up with these designs?
Well, there were a couple of layers. I mean, there was the technical layer when we started of just trying to figure out the size and how we were going to make the thing work. I mean, like Shelley mentioned, we made it slightly bigger, but then it became about inches trying to hide that we had made it bigger, because we were shooting part on the real ship and part on our set, so you didn't want those differences to show. I mean, we were incredibly fortunate that we had the kid there, because we had, a living encyclopedia of what was, and it's the only one of those ships that's taken to that period. And it's very difficult finding, you can find a lot of pictures of the outsides of the ship, but you cannot find many pictures of the inside, because they didn't want anybody knowing what was in the ships. So a lot of the ship pictures you see are actually coming from the shipyard going to the naval yard, and the ship has nothing on it. It's got no radar, it's got nothing. So they really, trying to find interior shots is quite difficult. So having the USS Kidd, which has certainly built, has scoured the US for parts, and they have a lot of people involved, but they also have a lot of people who actually worked on that kind of ship in their group. So we were able to get a lot of information through this man, Tim Nesmith, who was kind of ran the ship, and he would call his mentors and kind of their network to find out specific questions we had. So it was interesting, because it really was more hands-on learning. It was, I mean, there was some from books you could read, but really and truly photographic, except for the exterior of the ships, was a little difficult. But we had a full-scale model there, so it was nice. Just run down the street. So
thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for our first session. David, Shelley, Julie, thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day. You guys can log off.
Thank you. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's very clear that we all worked